A game developer with over 20 years of experience just had their code exposed to thousands of people, and what we saw raises some serious questions about experience versus actual skill. But the real issue isn't just the code quality, it's how he's responding to criticism that every developer should pay attention to. What's up, everyone? So today we're talking about Thor, also known as Pirate Software, because recently his code has kind of come under some scrutiny. His code for his game Heartbound has come under some scrutiny, and screenshots of this code is circulating online. The reactions were mixed, to put it politely, and as a junior to mid-level developer with about 5 years of experience in the industry, I want to break down what we're actually looking at here, because this situation teaches us some crucial lessons about growth mindset, handling criticism, and the reality of shipping code. For those of you who don't know Pirate Software or Thor, he is a Twitch streamer who focuses mostly on game development, working on his game called Heartbound. He claims that he has 20 years of experience in the industry, with roughly 7 years of that working at Blizzard, and he's done different things like hacking for I think it's Department of Energy. He's also won some black badges at DEF CON, and while I think overall he's a positive streamer, at least has been until he recently fell into this controversy, he definitely does set himself up to be an authority figure in the development space. I do want to make it perfectly clear, because I really don't want to put out any misinformation. I did used to watch Thor for a while. I have stopped watching him after the Stop Killing Games issue, but before his OnlyFans issue before the OnlyFans controversy in World of Warcraft. And overall, I was a fan, but I'm not anymore. I don't believe that he is deserving of the level of hatred and criticism that he's getting, so please don't pile on to that. But I also want to make sure that it's clear, I have not seen Thor specifically state that he is a senior developer or make any statements directly regarding being some form of god-tier developer. I haven't seen those types of statements. However, when you present yourself as an authority figure, as a game developer, he's not specifically saying he's a 20-year coding developer, but I think he knows what he's doing, and that he knows that this is going to lead people to believe that his experience level is a lot higher than it actually is. And I think that's a big problem, and a big reason he's getting the level of pushback that he's getting. And I think because people are starting to see the cracks in the persona that he puts online, I think that's why he's a lot more defensive and not open to any type of criticism or feedback, whether constructive or not. So this video really actually isn't geared towards Pirate Software, because I don't think there's anything he's going to learn from anything that I have to say. I kind of want to gear this video more towards all the other developers in this space, so that we can learn how to, I guess, not be him, and we can learn how to better ourselves. Also, I'm not actually going to be doing any type of comprehensive code review. There are much better videos out there, much better developers that have been doing that themselves. Coding Jesus is an example. The other thing is, for me personally, I don't really like to critique small snippets of code, because I don't have the whole code base to reference. I don't have documentation to reference, whether it's his or, this old form of Game Maker Studio. I don't really want to go back and research all of that. And also with code reviews, when I do them, I do like to actually speak to the developer and get their insight and their reasoning for why they did something a certain way, because understanding that might actually decide whether I push back on the code that they've done in a code review, or build on top of it, or, some other third thing. So I do have some thoughts on the code. Anyway, with that out of the way, sorry for the long intro, but let's now address the elephant in the room. From what we can see in the screenshots and stream footage, Thor's code does have some issues that you'd typically catch in a professional environment. We're talking about things like inconsistent naming conventions, some questionable architectural decisions, patterns that would probably get flagged in a code review, or at least I'd have some things to say about it, and comments galore. But here's the thing, and this is crucial, the code does work. Heartbound runs, players can play it, and even though it's been in development for 8 years, it running is not nothing. And honestly, I can kind of relate to this approach. When I'm tackling difficult coding tasks, my process is literally make it work first, then try to improve it before submitting a pull request to have my changes merged into the main code base. Sometimes I know my solution isn't great, but I'm stuck on how to improve it, so I find a senior developer who has some time and I ask for their help. The difference here is that I have a feedback loop. I have senior developers who review my code and coach me for better approaches, and crucially, I feel like I'm open to feedback. That's where things kind of get complicated with Thor's situation. The way he talks about development, like I said, makes him sound like he should be the senior developer I'd go to for advice. His public persona projects authority and deep experience, but when you look at the code, it tells a really different story. The real issue here is not that Thor writes what might be considered junior level code. We all started somewhere. There's no shame in that. The problem, I think, is the mismatch between the level of expertise he projects publicly and what we see in practice. See, when you position yourself as a highly experienced developer, when you give technical advice with a certain level of authority, and when you make claims about your professional background, people naturally expect your code to reflect that level of skill. It's about authenticity and accurate self-representation. This matters because newer developers look up to content creators for guidance. For me, I am at my core a self-taught developer. About 5 years ago, I kind of got tired with IT and wanted to transition into something else. So I started learning to code, ended up at a coding boot camp, and I relied very heavily my first couple of years on content creators, on tutorials, on documentation, on articles that people wrote. And eventually, I did get my associates in computer science. I'm working towards my bachelor's degree, but there was a time where someone like Thor is definitely an authority figure that I would have looked up to. And if someone presents themselves as a senior authority but demonstrates junior level practices, it can mislead people about what good code actually looks like. And when that person then dismisses criticism instead of engaging with it constructively, it sets a terrible example for the community. Now, to play devil's advocate here, I do want to acknowledge the fact that over the last few weeks, Thor has gotten a lot of hate and a lot of criticism. Some of it deserved, some of it not. And I don't even know what I would do in a situation like that, where everything that I do is put under a microscope and is criticized from the most negative lens possible. With that, though, I have seen evidence prior to this that he doesn't take criticism very well at all. So I have no reason to believe that he would have handled constructive criticism any better prior to the situation that he finds himself in right now. And that's really important, because here's where things get really concerning for me as a developer who really cares about the development community and its growth. From what I've observed, Thor hasn't shown much indication that he wants anything other than positive feedback. Again, even prior to the drama he's in. When technical criticism comes up, the response tends to be defensive rather than curious. And this is a huge red flag in professional development. In my experience, the best developers I work with are the ones who actively seek out criticism. They want to know where their code can improve, and they'll ask questions like, what would you do differently here? Or how can I make this more maintainable? But there is a pattern here that every developer should take note of. When someone doesn't take constructive criticism well, when they only want to hear praise, that is how your skill stagnates. That's how you end up writing the same junior level code for years without improving. Now look, I get it, okay? Criticism stings, especially when it's public. When I first started having my code reviewed, it felt personal. But here's what changed everything for me. I realized that criticism of my code wasn't criticism of me as a person. I chose to view it as an opportunity to level up. The developers who grow the fastest are the ones who can separate their ego from their code. They can look at feedback and think, oh, that's interesting. I didn't consider that approach, instead of getting uber defensive. Now, Thor has been working on Heartbound, I'm pretty sure, completely alone for 8 years. And solo development is a completely different beast than professional team development. In my day job, I have code reviews, pair programming, senior developers mentoring me, and constant feedback on my practices. When I write something that works but isn't great, a senior developer will see my pull request and coach me through making it better. That collaborative feedback is huge for growth because we want the best code in our code base. When you're coding alone, especially on a long-running project like a video game, you don't get those growth opportunities naturally. You have to seek them out. And that's where our community of developers becomes crucial. I even look back at my own code from even just a few months ago and I think, wow, I sucked back then. And that's the natural progression when you're getting regular feedback and learning. But if I was coding in isolation for 8 years and I wasn't actively seeking out ways to improve, I probably wouldn't have grown nearly as much. And I still have such a long way to go. So in many ways, Thor is at a disadvantage, but here's the thing. When the community tries to provide that missing feedback, how you respond to it matters. You can either see it as the collaborative input you've been missing, or you can dismiss it and stay stuck. And a lot of the code that they're looking at is older code, so it's bound to not be perfect. There's also the legacy aspect to consider. The code was clearly built on an older version of GameMaker Studio, and when you're 8 years into a project, refactoring everything becomes a massive undertaking. Maybe based on what Thor knows now, he'd code his game differently from scratch. But when you have a working system that players are actually using, the if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality starts to make sense, even if the code isn't pretty and antiquated and maybe really inefficient. This doesn't excuse everything, but it does provide important context. It also doesn't excuse dismissing valid technical feedback or refusing to acknowledge areas for improvement. Here's what really frustrates me about this whole situation. It could have been an incredible learning opportunity, not just for Thor, but for his entire audience. Imagine if instead of getting defensive about the code criticism, Thor would have said something like, you know what? You're right. This code could have been better. I've been working alone for so long that I've missed some best practices. Let me spend some time on stream refactoring this and showing you all how to improve legacy code. Sorry, I can't do the deep voice thing. I tried. I won't do that again. But the educational value would have been incredible, and it would have shown a growth mindset, humility, and continuous learning. It could have actually boosted his credibility by proving he can recognize and improve upon past work. All our code sucked at one point. You can improve it. But that requires being open to criticism, and unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case here. Instead, we get defensiveness and dismissal of valid technical feedback. This is a perfect example for other developers of how not to handle criticism. When someone points out issues with your code, the response should be more curiosity, not defensiveness. You could just ask, tell me more about that, instead of, you don't understand my situation. Oh, and a quick side note about that whole running on a smart fridge thing. I'm not going to debate whether it's actually running on the fridge hardware because I can't confidently confirm or deny it. But from what I can see, it looks like it's just in bridge mode using the fridge as a monitor of sorts.
It is irrelevant to increase performance on a game that runs on a smart fridge.
The day my devastating video on Pirate Software's slop lighting system dropped, he did an 8-hour cope stream, justifying the slop by referring to the fact that his game runs on a smart fridge. So let's analyze what's really going on. Here's the video of Heartbound running, quote-unquote, on a smart fridge. Let's rewind a little. What do we notice here? We notice that the game is actually being run on a laptop and streamed to the fridge using a Raspberry Pi device. If we zoom in a little closer, you can see it says connecting to Heartbridge, which is the name of the laptop and the hotspot connection he set up. In this case, the screen simply acts as a controller. Everything is running on the laptop, and the actual output is just being streamed back to the smart fridge. The fridge isn't computing anything itself. To emphasize this, here's a video of a washing machine running Death Stranding.
So when your game runs at perfect performance on a smart fridge instead of a Lowe's, come back and talk shit.
Here's the thing. If you're going to make claims like running on a smart fridge, especially when you're positioning yourself as a technical authority, you better be prepared to back that up with some real details. The community that he's built deserves transparency, not flashy demonstrations. He could explain what's going on here, how his infrastructure made that work, if it actually did work, or what would need to happen in order to get it to run on a smart fridge instead of just some fan made the video. And here's what we can learn from this whole situation. First, there is a huge difference between code that works and code that's well written. Both have value, but in professional environments, you typically need both. Second, the collaborative aspect of development is massive. Those code reviews, senior developers coaching you through better approaches, all that, that's how you grow. If you're working solo, you need to actively seek out that type of feedback somehow, some way. Third, this is pretty crucial, always be learning and improving your skills. The moment you think you know everything, the moment you stop being open to feedback, that's when you stop growing, not just as a developer, but as a person. And I've seen developers with many, many years of experience, many more than me, who are essentially coding at my level because they stopped learning after their first few years. Fourth, be honest about your skill level. There's nothing wrong with being a junior developer or a mid-level developer or even a senior developer who has gaps in certain areas. No one knows everything. What matters is accurate self-representation and a willingness to learn and improve. And finally, please learn how to take criticism well. Your code is not you. Criticism of your code is not a personal attack. It's an attempt to help you improve and make sure we have the best code in our code base. The developers who embrace this mindset are the ones who grow the fastest and build the strongest careers. Really, let's just use this situation as a cautionary tale. Don't be the developer who gets stuck at one skill level and can't handle feedback. Don't be the person who projects expertise that you don't actually have. And definitely don't be someone who dismisses valid criticism because it's uncomfortable to hear. Look, this isn't really about Thor specifically. It's about patterns we see in the tech community all the time. He just happens to be the perfect example. People who talk a big game and can't back it up, people who can't handle criticism, people who stop learning because they think they've made it. As a development community, we need to do better. We need to celebrate continuous learning, embrace feedback, and be honest about our skill levels. We need to be able to lift each other up by giving constructive criticism and receiving it gracefully. The goal isn't to tear anyone down, or at least it shouldn't be. We should be hoping to help everyone improve, but that only works if people are open to improvement in the first place. The real tragedy here isn't that Thor's code has issues. It's that he's missing an opportunity to grow and to help his community to grow with him, modeling how to handle criticism and continuous improvement. He's showing us how not to respond to feedback. But that's a valuable lesson too. Sometimes the best examples are the negative ones. Sometimes we learn from watching what not to do instead of from watching the perfect execution. So I guess let's use this as motivation to be better, stay humble, stay curious, and always be open to learning, because the moment we think we know everything is the moment we stop being good developers or just people in general. But what do you think? Anyway, that's all I've got for you today. I hope I was able to add something valuable to the conversation about Thor and his code. And I also hope that one day he can kind of learn to grow above all this. Again, please don't send any hate his way. I think he's had enough. We can criticize him because everyone is deserving of criticism, myself included. But I think he just needs a bit of a break. He also clearly isn't learning anything from the criticism he's getting. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Peace out. Bye.